Hello, and welcome to an overview of behavior modification methods and techniques derived from behavioral learning theories. This is the sixth and final presentation on behavioral learning theories as they are applied to schooling and education. My name is Bill Hewitt, and I am Professor Emeritus at Valdosta State University and adjunct faculty at Capella and Walden Universities. There are two primary objectives for this presentation. First, at the end of the presentation, you should be able to name and describe 5 categories for using behavior modification techniques. And second, you should be able to describe specific behaviorally oriented methods within each category and provide examples for how they could be used. There are 5 categories of behavior modification techniques that will be discussed in this presentation. These categories focus on the purpose to which the techniques are used. The first category describes methods that can be used to develop a new behavior, that is, to initially increase the frequency of a target behavior. The second category describes methods that can be used to strengthen a new behavior, that is, to increase the frequency of a target behavior that is emitted, though it is only emitted infrequently. The third category describes methods that can be used to maintain an established behavior, that is, to keep a target behavior at a desired level once it is emitted on a regular basis. The fourth category describes methods that can be used to reduce inappropriate or undesired target behaviors. And finally, the fifth category describes methods that can be used to modify emotional behavior. The first method to be discussed in the category of developing a new behavior is called the successive approximation principle. Remember that the methods discussed in this category should be used with a target behavior that the seldom has seldom or never exhibited. The essential concept when using the successive approximation principle or shaping principle is to reward successive steps to the final target behavior. For example, suppose you would like a student to write a complete sentence with proper punctuation. You might first provide a reward simply for writing a word, the, then a noun, the boy, then a noun and a verb, the boy went, then a noun and a verb with a phrase, the boy went to the store, and finally a sentence with proper punctuation, capital T for the boy went to the store, period. The emphasis with this technique is to liberally provide rewards in the process of learning, rather than waiting until the exact target behavior is performed before providing reinforcement. A second method used to develop a new behavior is the principle of continuous application of consequences. Remember that this is called continuous reinforcement schedule, where a reward is immediately provided after every performance of a target behavior. For example, suppose you want a learner to successfully complete 3 math problems. You would provide a reinforcement after the completion of each math problem rather than waiting until all 3 are successfully completed. It's not hard to imagine that the first method, shaping, works best when applied with continuous reinforcement. This is a general recommended procedure when developing a new behavior. But what if the learner does not emit any behavior that can be shaped to the target behavior? This is when negative reinforcement is most appropriately used. You first arrange for the learner to be able to escape from a mild aversive stimulus by engaging in a target behavior. And remember, the principle of shaping states that the emitted behavior only needs to be a first approximation of the target behavior in order to be reinforced. Suppose you want a child to clean up her room. You could place her in the room and tell her she needs to clean it up. You could keep repeating this until she picks up something, at which point you immediately stop the commanding, the negative stimulus, and to begin to reinforce the behavior. Good. Where do you think you should put that? You can then offer to help the child in the cleaning process, constantly providing reinforcement for every cleaning up room behavior the child displays. The next time you want the child to clean up her room, you can say, let's go clean up your room. If the child complies, she has avoided the commanding stimulus that you used initially. You can say, "Thank you for being so helpful," as the child walks with you to the room. Another method can be used in developing a new behavior is called the Premack principle, after its founder, David Premack. The basic concept of the Premack principle is that a high-frequency behavior, or something the learner enjoys doing, can be used to reinforce a low-frequency behavior, or a target behavior in which you want the learner to engage, but which the learner seldom does. The key to this method is to make access to preferred activity contingent on completing the low-frequency, non-preferred activity. Your parents probably use this often: eat your peas and then you can go play. And for this reason, it's often called the grandma's rule. The final method to be discussed in developing a new behavior is the cueing principle. Using this principle, you would provide a cue or a signal as a reminder to the learner to emit the target behavior at a particular time. For example, a teacher might say, "Remember to use our inside voices as the children return from the great playground." This is then followed by "good job" or "thank you" when the children enter the building quietly. A cue can act as a discriminative stimulus, that is, an antecedent stimulus that signals a reward will be provided after the next display of the target behavior. However, in order for that to occur, the reinforcement has to be consistently provided when the learner is initially developing the behavior. There are two basic methods used when strengthening a new behavior. Remember that a behavior that is continuously reinforced will stop almost immediately when it is no longer reinforced. Therefore, once a behavior has been initially established, it is important to move to an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. The decreasing reinforcement principle states that you should increase the amount of time between opportunities for reinforcement if you're using a fixed interval schedule, or increase the number of target behaviors that must be emitted before reinforcement is provided if using a fixed ratio schedule. For example, you might start with having a quiz every day, and then begin to have a quiz every other day, and then begin to have a quiz every third day. So you're still on a fixed schedule, but you've increased from 1 to 2 to 3 days. The amount of time is increasing between opportunities to be reinforced. Using a ratio schedule, you could also begin to reward every second behavior rather than every display of the target behavior. You would then begin to reward every third, every fourth of the display of the target behavior. Again, this is still a fixed schedule, in this case, the fixed ratio schedule, but increasing the number of target behaviors must be emitted in order to be reinforced. A second principle for strengthening a new behavior is to move to a variable reinforcement schedule. Remember from the discussion of schedules when using consequences in operant conditioning that a variable interval schedule means a certain amount of time will have elapsed before a learner is capable of receiving a reinforcement by emitting the target behavior, and then a different amount of time is selected, or a certain number of target behaviors have been emitted and then a different number is designated. In general, it is important to move to this schedule only after engaging in decreasing reinforcement on a fixed schedule, be it interval or ratio. There's one basic principle that applies to maintaining an established behavior. This need arises because people change. What worked once, that is, the frequency of a behavior is controlled by the stimulus, will not work forever. The key is to present the reinforcer that once worked, but is losing its potency just before the presentation of a different stimulus. While it is intended that this new stimulus will in fact be a consequence, that determination can only be made after a change in behavior occurs. It is critical to observe this change in order to validate the stimulus as a consequence. There are several methods that can be used to reduce inappropriate or undesired behavior. One that might not be obvious is the satiation principle. The basic concept of operant conditioning theorists is that all behavior, that is, all responses, are under the control of a stimulus, that is, a consequence. If a behavior persists, it is because it is being reinforced. While the belief that the reinforcement might be internal violates the assumption that an external, observable stimulus is controlling behavior, nevertheless, allowing the student to continue the behavior, even insisting on it, can lead to a situation where the behavior is no longer reinforced. That is, the learner does not receive pleasure from it. For example, a student wads up paper and throws these at the trash can in front of the room. The student never stands up to take the paper to the trash, so the teacher does not have a behavior to reinforce. The teacher might say, "Johnny, I see you like to throw paper in the waste can, but you apparently need some more practice. Take all the paper out, throw it back in one piece at a time." Put the student right next to the trash can so there's no challenge in doing this. When you see the student beginning to be bored with the task, stop it immediately. Use negative reinforcement. Take it away. Say something like, "It looks like you've had enough practice, but when I see you throwing paper at the trash can again, I'll provide you with another opportunity to practice." You have to be careful with this technique as it can backfire. However, it is a good technique to have in one's arsenal. I remember a practicing teacher coming in one day and reporting his success with this technique. He taught high school social studies. He had a student who came into class every day joking and making it difficult to get the class settled down. So one day, as the student entered the room, the teacher said, "I think the class is a little gloom today. Can you tell a joke?" The student said, "Sure." The teacher then announced to the class, "John is going to tell a joke today. Everyone, pay attention." The student told his joke. The class laughed. Everyone settled down fairly quickly. The next day, the teacher followed the same routine. He asked the student to tell a joke. The student did. Everyone laughed. The class got right to work. He did this for about 2 weeks until one day the teacher asked him to tell the joke, and the student said, "No, I don't need to do that anymore." The student had gotten his fill. He was satiated and now could reduce that behavior. I asked him later how it was going. He said every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or something like that, the student would ask to tell a joke. The teacher would let him. But it was not a regular occurrence as it had been before. The extinction principle is basically the opposite of the satiation principle. In this case, you deprive the learner of the reinforcer, leading eventually to a reduction of the target behavior to a frequency of 0. For example, if a student is making annoying sounds to get your attention, and you have been attending to that behavior, you can ignore the behavior, that is, withdraw the attention, and the frequency of the annoying sounds will decrease. Again, this principle needs to be implemented carefully. If the student is doing the behavior to get other students' attention or enjoys hearing the sound, then you're not attending to the behavior is not withdrawing the reinforcement. Additionally, reducing the unwanted behavior does not automatically increase a desired behavior. Combining extinction of an unwanted target behavior with increasing a desired incompatible behavior is a desired option. For example, in the case study involving Greg calling his mom names in the previous presentation, that behavior could be ignored and saying more appropriate things to his mom could be reinforced. As discussed in the presentation on operant conditioning techniques, you can use response cost, that is, remove a positive or pleasant stimulus immediately after an undesired target behavior is emitted, or punishment, that is, add a negative or aversive stimulus immediately after an undesired target behavior is emitted. It is important to recognize, however, that response cost and punishment always result in increased hostility and aggression on the part of the learner. It should be used infrequently and in conjunction with reinforcement. The fear reduction principle is derived from classical conditioning. However, it should be noted that a student who might benefit from this technique should be working with a counselor, and a teacher should be implementing this strategy under those conditions, if at all. The basic purpose of this technique is to assist a student to overcome a fear of a particular stimulus that the learner might encounter in the classroom or school. For example, the learner might get uncontrollably anxious in a testing situation. The concept is to present a stimulus, such as a paragraph written on a sheet of paper, that does not elicit the fear response. Then the stimulus would be gradually made to look more and more like a test, while the learner is taught to remain relaxed, and secure. It is important to reward the learner for remaining calm. Again, this is a technique or method that should be used by teachers with caution. This concludes the presentation on behavior modification. Previous presentations focused on an overview of 3 behavioral learning theories: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and contiguity theory, a more complete introduction to classical conditioning theory, and 3 presentations on operant conditioning theory. Additionally, there are several short quizzes that learners can use to check their understandings of the different learning theories.